Welcome back and to this final video of this project. This video is all about concentrating on our progress circle, which we're going to create, just like in the final version just here. So each time the user enters a value into the number field, such as this, the weekly target will then be updated, and this will be converted into a percentage so we can update the progress circle. Now, I am aware there's many different ways we can do this. We can use things such as the canvas, and there's lots more complex options which we can use. However, I've tried to keep this as simple as possible for this project. So the way we're going to do this is by making use of a CSS function called the Conic Gradient. And the way this works is to create a gradient of color, which is transitioned around the center point. So here we can see we have the first section, which is red, and this is from 0 to 6 degrees. The orange section then carries on from 6 to 18 degrees. Then we have the yellow section up to 45 degrees, and this then continues round. If we scroll down, we can see the difference between the conic gradient and the radial gradient. The conic type is more suited to our needs, since we're going to make use of this rotation to create our progress element. The radial gradient, on the other hand, provides the transition outwards from the center, creating these rings which are not really much use for our circle. So let's start over in the index.html. Earlier on, we added a wrapper for this section and then created a to-do section. So inside of here, I'm going to create two new divs. This first one is going to be the actual div for our circle. So I'm going to give this an ID of progress circle. Then nested inside, I'm going to add a second div. This will have the ID of progress center. The reason for this section will become more clear very soon. So first of all, we're going to target all of this section, which is down at the bottom, starting with our text. This is contained inside of the progress section. So let's save this and go over to our styles.css. Right at the very bottom, we can begin by targeting the progress section. We can align the text into the center and also add some padding onto the very bottom. Next, the text is contained in the level 3 heading. So let's target the progress H3. Font size of 1.6 rems. And also the font weight. I'm going to set this to be lighter. Next, we can begin to work on our progress circle. So we have the outer wrapper, which is progress circle wrapper. So we're going to grab this, set the flex box, and then justify the content to be in the center. Back to our style sheet. Add this in. Making use of the flex box, so we can then justify our content into the center. This is going to place the circle, once we create it, into the middle of our section. Next up, we have the progress circle itself, which is going to have the conic gradient. So back over to our style sheet. This was an ID. To make this equal, we can set the width. I'm going to go for 250 pixels and also a matching height. The example we've seen before on the Mozilla website used a square section, just like we see here. But instead, I'm going to turn this into a circle by adding a border radius. A value of 50% will make this circular. And now we can make use of our conic gradient by setting this as a background property. We did see lots of different values entered on the example before, but all we need is two different values. We just need the green values, which is the total number of miles the user has run, and then the grey section for the rest of the circle. So these are just going to be placeholder values for now, and we'll update these with JavaScript very soon. The green color of 70, db70. Adding the first value of 50% means that this will run from 0 right through to 50%. The second value is going to be a hex value of 2D, 3740. And for this second value, if we set this to be 50%, if we don't add a second value such as 70, this will run right through to 100%. So now let's save this and go over to our project, reload. This now places our conic gradient into the full size of our circle. But if we take a look at the final version, we have this center circle just here, giving us the appearance of a ring. This is the section which we've added into the middle of Progress Center. So let's grab this. And all we're going to do is effectively use this as a mask, covering up the center of the circle. So this is going to be similar to just above, but we're going to make it a little smaller by setting the width to be 220. The same for the height. And this will also need a border radius, so it's a circle. To also give this a appearance of a ring, we need to make the background color the same as the rest of the app. So the current value was 1C, 262F. Over to our project and let's see how this looks. Okay, so we have the center of the circle now in place, but we just need to make sure this is centered. So we can do this inside of our Progress Circle wrapper. Let's set this with the display type of flex. Remember, this is for the wrapper. We can then justify the content across the page into the center and also set the vertical alignment using align items. Good, this now looks exactly how we want it to. So now let's go to our script.js and we can create a function which is going to update this. Let's call this calc goal. The first thing we need to do inside this function is to access our total value. This is the value just here. And once we have this, we can then divide this by our goal. So the way we can grab this, just like above, where we grab the total value, let's copy this, paste this in, and this makes use of our reducer function to grab all of the items inside of our array and add them all together. The next step we need to take is to calculate a percentage between 0 and 100. We're then going to use these values inside of our CSS to update our two colors. So to convert this into a percentage, let's first grab the total value, and then to get this as a percentage, we need to divide this by our goal, divided by 100. We can then store this inside of a constant. Let's call this completed percent. We can also do a console log before we go any further and check this is all working fine. So let's add this into our log. And we can also call this function from handle submit. So let's save this, open up the developer tools with right click and inspect into the console. So let's add a value of 10. So this divided by our goal is going to give us a value of 40%. If we do 2.5, 10 plus 2.5 is equal to half of our goal, resulting in 50%. Now we have this value, we can now use this to update the styling of our progress circle. So let's grab this by the ID over in the script. Back to calc goal, we can remove the console log. And then call document.querySelector. The selector was an ID, so we'll pass the hash value in of progress circle. Store this inside of a constant called progress circle. And now rather than having the conic gradient hard coded into here, we can now comment this out and then add this inside of JavaScript. So the way to do this is to access our progress circle element. We can set any style property such as our background. And we can once again set this equal to our conic gradient. So let's copy this section just like it is inside the styling. Paste this in as a string inside of the quotations. So these are still just hard-coded values, so let's try this out. So any values which we add inside of here will still result in a 50-50 split. Meaning our next step is to now make these two values more dynamic. The way we can do this, if we remove the quotations, and we can replace these with the backticks. These backticks are going to allow us to create a template string, which is a way of inserting variables into our regular text. So we can remove our 50%. And the way we insert a variable is to use the dollar symbol and then the curly braces. The first value is going to be the equivalent of our variable completed percent. So let's add this in. We also need the percent symbol. And then we need to update our second value. Again, this is going to be our completed percent all the way through to 100%. So since this is our first value, this will go from 0 right through to our completed percent. So say this is 50%, it will go from 0 to 50. This second value will then go from 50 right through to the end of our circle, which is 100%. Just before we update our progress circle, we can add a conditional statement just above. We can add an if statement to check if the completed percent is more than 100. If it is, then we're just going to reset this back to 100. So our progress circle always goes from 0 to 100. So we can check if the completed percent is greater than 100. If it is, we'll then reset this back to 100%. And let's try this out. So 12.5, which is exactly half. Our progress circle is now 50-50. Let's add a new value. And let's get this round to 100%, so 22.5. We just need to add a value of 2.5. And this now completes our circle. If we try to add a new value, we see that the progress circle doesn't go any further since we've achieved 100% of our target for that week. This is now all of the functionality now complete for our running tracker. Just to finish this off, we're going to add a media query just to restrict the maximum width of some of these elements. So back to our styles. Let's add a media query, which is going to target our screens alongside the minimum screen width of 800 pixels. So for 800 pixel devices and above, we'll restrict the body width to be equal to 60%. We can also restrict the width of this number input too. So still within the media query, the input with the type of number. All we need to do again is set the width, and this time of 40%. And finally, we can also reduce the size of this SVG on the larger screens. Let's target the SVG, setting the maximum width to be 50%. When we reload, we still see there's lots of spacing above the top and bottom of this SVG. The way to fix this, if we go to our index.html, is to go to our SVG opening tag. Inside of this tag, we can see we still have the width and the height set. So we can remove these, allowing the sizing to be controlled with our style sheet. Save this, and now SVG now takes up less space. Congratulations for now reaching the end of this project, and I'll see you in the next one.